So, welcome to the fourth installment in our series on the transformation of casino advertising. Um, we've done a lot. We started with a little 101, and then we looked at all of the new options. Um, Last week, we saw some amazing insights that we can get, that we should get when we're talking to our media partners. And today is probably the one that you should have invited your finance person to, because we're talking about ROI. And I know how much they love an ROI discussion. Before I turn the driver controls over to Drew, I want to remind you that this session and all of the rest are going to be available via recording. You'll receive this link in a couple of days or so. And then for a little housekeeping, first is that our next and last session is going to address striking a balance between our media plans, between traditional and all these new opportunities. And that's going to be in 3 weeks rather than our 2-week pattern that we've been observing, but you'll get the reminders and you should be fine. If you've attended a boot camp this year, or if you register for one, you're going to also have access to our G4 webinar that we're doing next week. What else? We are thinking of taking another swing at the influencer marketing series that we did, because it's evolved so much since we did our first round 2 years ago. Can't believe it was 2 years ago. So stay tuned for that. I should send it out in an email when we get our act together. But if there's a topic on your mind, let me know, because we love to build our programming around what you want to hear about and talk about. And then registration is open for our Midwest Regional Boot Camp in Minneapolis. It's going to be in August. And the Northwest registration is going to be ready pretty soon. That's going to be in November in Portland. I'm really excited about that one, about both of them. It looks like chat may be working, but let's stick to what we've been doing before and just put your questions in the Q&A. I'll keep an eye on them and interrupt Drew whenever something is relevant. And I guess that's all for me. You see Adele is here, not at the hotel this time around. Drew, take it away.
All right, sounds good. Let's get some screen share going, and we will see where that gets us. Give me 1 second. There we go. Okay, so today we're going to be talking a little bit more, trying to really bring everything that we've discussed these first 4 weeks, or excuse me, first 3 weeks, and really try to bring it full circle and talk about really making the most of your budget. So, pretty large and roundabout topic there, but everything that we've learned these first few weeks should certainly come into play. Making the most of your budget doesn't really make a whole lot of sense if we haven't set up the right targeting, or identified the right KPIs and benchmarks and goals for our campaigns. But we'll talk a little bit more about some of the ways that you can optimize when your campaigns are running, to make sure that you are getting the most out of your budget. We'll talk about different ways to kind of show the attribution, and talk about some of the best practices. And really what I'd like for us to get out of this is a better understanding of what we should be able to get, especially from the digital world and some of the different vendors that we will be working with, but also learn how to, package this, or receive it from a vendor, package it up, and then bring it back to the powers that be, so we can show that our campaigns are working. So as we've kind of done a couple of times now, we'll take another look at that marketing funnel, just do kind of a quick review there. I think it is important to continue to understand where everything comes into play. After that, we'll talk a little bit about some of the benchmarks that we see in the digital world in terms of just raw metrics and raw performance, as well as discussing some of the optimizations that you can push some of your partners and vendors to perform for you if you're not seeing those types of benchmarks. And then we'll kind of bring that a little bit more into something that is what should be truly meaningful to you all, which is full scale attribution. How do you go and show this campaign worked or is working? So we'll dig into it, a little bit of that there. So here's our marketing funnel again. As I mentioned, I do think it's always extremely important to kind of bring up, where all of the different pieces fit in. I have no doubt that you all are probably bombarded daily with digital vendors, probably traditional vendors from TV, broadcast, radio, everybody who's trying to kind of get their piece of the puzzle. Some are selling, their traditional stuff weaved in with digital. Some are selling pure digital, like a company like Q1 Media would be. But it is important to understand where all of this fits in. I feel like lots of times when the newest gadget or the newest solution comes out in the digital world, everybody wants to be on it. Everybody wants to be on CTV or podcast, which is kind of the latest and greatest that's being monetized right now. But it's also important to understand where that fits in your overall consumer funnel, and then most importantly, is it even the right solution for us? If we go into a phase where we need to start to drive a lot of conversion and we need a lot of traffic going to our site, maybe we just went through a rebrand, something like a podcast or an audio solution might not be the best because it's not typical to drive a lot of clicks to the site. So certainly important to always keep that in mind. And I would encourage you, once this webinar is wrapped and you all get the chance to look at all of these presentations we've put together, if you've got new vendor pitches coming up, pull this type of information up, ask them where they fit in this funnel. If they come in with a 100% CTV heavy type of proposal, ask them why, or ask them, challenge them. How are you going to get people to my site though? If CTV is optimized towards the video completion rate, what am I going to get out of that? So push them to be able to tell you, what you're going to get out of it. Push them to be able to show you, stronger attribution, and it should put you in a really good space to start to have these conversations a little bit in greater scale with the powers that be.
Well, I think as the marketing directors or advertising managers, we should also kind of understand what's the goal we're trying to reach with the media buys and where on the funnel is, because that kind of helps filter. I was going to say funnel, it helps filter some of the opportunities in or out, right?
For sure, for sure. Highly would suggest all of that. But like I said, more importantly, or just as important, I should say, there's so many people out there in these spaces that are trying to sell these days, and lots of times that means they have quotas to hit, and and sometimes you get sold things that might not be 100% fit for everybody. So I think the more that we understand, the more that we can potentially poke holes or just ask for additional information, the better you're going to be in the long run in terms of securing and buying media that's going to make the most sense for your property. Sorry about that. There we go. Okay. So taking a look just a little bit deeper here in terms of some of the overall raw metrics and benchmarks, we had alluded to this a little bit in the solutions, but I did want to bring it back up today. These are pretty much the typical types of digital tactics that you'll see thrown around a lot these days. We reviewed these in the second webinar that we had a bunch of weeks back, I guess about a month ago now. And so I wanted to just spend a few minutes really kind of talking about the overall benchmarks in terms of what the IAB, which is the Interactive Advertising Bureau, what it dictates for the digital space, as well as what we see a little bit more in the space and what I think you should be able to kind of push and noodle your vendors to hit for you.
Hey, this is a question for both of you, either both of you or one of you, but doesn't IAB have a newsletter that you can subscribe to get some of this content? They used to?
You should be able to, if it's helpful. There's actually a lot of different subscriptions that I belong to that help me keep I guess up to speed in the digital space. There's places like Media Radar, Media Post, and a couple of different ones that are always sending off articles, and you can subscribe for as much as little as you'd like. I get these emails into my inbox every day just to kind of click around and see what other people are doing, or what's new in the vertical, so on and so forth. So I would highly suggest, if the digital world is one that you're expanding in, get the subscription for those and just kind of absorb the content as it makes sense for you. But definitely a great suggestion there. So digging in a little bit deeper here, in-page display, and then I guess what we'll call kind of in-page or pre-roll video. From the display standpoint, the IAB dictates a 0.08 click-through rate, which that is, what they would call kind of industry standard. So typically anything that's in or around that vicinity should at least be acceptable. Typically for a lot of our campaigns, we're able to optimize. We'll talk about ways that we can optimize here in a second, or ways that you can push your vendors to optimize. But usually we're able to see a little bit closer to a 0.15, maybe even a 0.20%. There's a lot of different things that will come into play on this. You can set up all the best targeting and all of the best, ad serving, but if your creative is garbage, you might not be getting the interaction, so on and so forth. So there are lots of different ways to take a look at this, and we'll talk about it a bit more on the optimization page coming up here. For pre-roll, the video completion rate that IAB sets out is a 65%. I would say that you can shoot for really kind of closer to 70% plus. Lots of times we're able to see 75, even 80% on some of our campaigns. And a lot of it just comes from the right optimizations, which, like I said, we'll talk about here in a second. When you're using custom data in that mobile and location targeting arena, the device ID stuff that we have talked about a little bit, this is going to be a little bit higher. Mobile click-through rates are generally a little bit better than the desktop ones, and so you're going to see probably a bit closer to a 0.30 CTR. But like I said, I think you can push for 0.35, 0.4. Sometimes we even see well over 0.5 for basic display. So a really, really good kind of platform to get a lot of clicks to your site and to drive further engagement. Now with this, and we'll also talk about this a couple slides from now, sometimes there's a caveat to this. Reaching people on the mobile platform, as we've discussed, is a great way to get eyeballs onto your brand. It's a great way to expand that awareness. I think the caveat with that comes when you start to look at your Google Analytics. Probably not going to get as much time on site, probably going to get a slightly higher bounce rate. Sometimes those ads are tiny, people don't need to click them. They get to your site, they bounce real quick. So I would definitely say to take this with a little bit of grain of salt, and not think that every single click that's coming to your site is 100% ready to engage with your content. But this is why we can set up other tactics like retargeting to remind them to come back and mix in some other types of solutions to continue to remind them to engage with us further. On the digital audio side of things, remember audio, CTV, and video is really kind of viewed more on or optimized more on the completion rate. You can optimize towards clicks on digital audio. Some of them do have clickable types of banners that will pop up as you're watching them. That being said, it is a premium price. You're paying a higher CPM for them. For us, the value is really in getting that 15 or 30-second spot to be heard all the way. You're paying for that kind of extra service where somebody's hearing your message instead of just seeing it in a tiny little box. So we're going to want to make sure that the majority of them can hear that message all the way through. So digital audio, 90% is pretty much industry standard. We're usually seeing closer to kind of the mid 90s. I'd say 94 to 96 video completion rate, which means that 95 out of 100 people that we're serving the ad to are going to listen to it all the way through. Paid search is going to vary very widely by industry. I would say on average, somewhere between about a 3 and 4% click-through rate is probably pretty standard. There's some industries like the financial sector, which might be closer to a 2. Some industries like the entertainment sector might be closer to 5 or 6. So 3 to 4% is a pretty good barometer. And all of these metrics, I think they're really good for looking at them on both sides of the equation. If you are drastically below on one of the metrics, something is probably pretty darn wrong, and optimizations need to be put into place to get you back up to speed. The other side of it, if we're drastically high, something could be off there too. We could be getting click or bot traffic that's mixing into the mix of our ad serving. It could be putting a lot of false clicks on there. So sometimes, the old it's too good to be true adage, can definitely be applied. There's been a handful of times, we bid on inventory pretty much all across the digital ecosphere. And there's been a handful of times where we just see metrics that are just through the roof. And while we want to sit there and slap hands and talk about how great we are, sometimes when you start to analyze it and pull back the layers of the onion, you might have, one source of inventory coming from one exchange into your overall ad server that might be just getting, the lion's shares of the click. Considering everything is usually run through, the ad verification process to make sure that, we're limiting that type of bot traffic. Sometimes it's just still too good to be true. So I would be analyzing on both sides of it, and if it looks like your numbers are entirely too great, we can poke holes in that sometimes too. And, that could be the opposite of what we're trying to do. If our ad spend is going to a lot of bot traffic and leading to a lot of invalid clicks, it's not going to fill our funnel in the long term. So while it might look great on a report that we got X amount of clicks and our click-through rate is triple the industry standard, if something's wrong with that, it's not going to fill our funnel. So this is really about learning how to poke holes in it on both sides. From the CTV and OTT perspective, 95% is what IAB dictates. Usually we're able to get 97, 98%. A lot of the inventory on the CTV channels is unskippable these days. So it's a bit easier to really optimize towards that, but we can push for very high video completion rates in that streaming space. In terms of digital out of home, which, those are some of the little screens you'll see on the gas station pump when you're pumping your gas, or maybe the kiosks as you're walking through the mall. These aren't really measured in clicks or anything beyond impressions at this point. And an impression might even be a little bit of a interesting word to apply there. Typically we view impressions that are on our computer system as, you know, I think what we talked about a few weeks ago, it's 50% of the ad pixels are in view for at least 1 second. So, very, very loose definition of an impression. And I think from the out of home perspective, it can be even different. It's not really measured as an impression. It's more of just the average amount of eyeballs that might be walking by that kiosk in the mall, or pumping potential gas there. So it's one of the newer, solutions in the digital space, which is starting to grow relatively quickly. But in terms of how it's measured right now, it's only impressions at this time. Social media platforms are usually somewhere in the 1% to 2% click-through rate range. I think we've talked about this recently as well. I think the social platforms, as they continue to get bigger and bigger and they have more eyeballs there, more people are being very, very used to A, getting served ads there, but B, they interact with them a lot. Obviously, I've been in this digital world for a long time. I know 100% when I'm getting serving ads, when I'm get served the right type of ads, and I know why they're being served to me. If it comes in on Facebook and it's about like golf or golf shoes, that's probably a pretty darn good chance I'm gonna click on it, because they're serving to an interested consumer who's super into that type of content. So I think the platforms have over these last few years, really kind of been able to lock in a lot more eyeballs, but most importantly, they've been able to kind of link up ads, with the preferences for those particular eyeballs. And so that's why we start to see those CTRs go up a little bit. Text and SMS is going to be viewed a little bit more on, I guess, what we would call like an engagement rate or an open rate. As I've mentioned, that's not something that Q1 Media has really dabbled in the past, although it is something we're looking into. That being said, if you are buying those types of solutions, I would just really push that type of vendor, like, hey, how is this measured? To engage with it, more people to open it, so on and so forth. Are you all able to hear me okay? Okay, I just got a note saying my speakers was disabled, so I guess we'll keep going.
It did switch.
And then retargeting and almost
sources.
and then remarketing, however we want to call that. That's usually going to be a little bit closer to a 0.10 click-through rate if you're using like a retargeting display type of solution. But once again, I think you can push for 0.15, even closer to 0.20 and above. Remember, these are people who have come to our site at one point, so if we're going to be reserving them ads, I guess in theory they should be willing to engage with us again. So lots of times those benchmarks will be just a little bit higher than the normal CTRs you might get for display. So, as I mentioned, hopefully this just gives us a really good chance to start to evaluate what might be coming across our desks right now. Prior to Q1 Media, I've sold for other media type of companies where, back in the day would go in and talk all about all these clicks that are coming to the site and how great our CTR was and all of those great types of things. So, people are going to spin this however they need to make it sound really, really great. You need to make sure that whatever is being, spun for you is lining up with your overall goals of the campaign. And most importantly, it's doing what you need it to do. It's getting people to engage with your brand further. It's helping you work them down that funnel. And then most importantly, at some point, it's going to lead to further engagement, whether, they come and actually visit your property or sign up for players cards or whatever it might be from there. So this should give you a nice little barometer to be able to evaluate what's currently coming across your desk. There we go. So now let's start to talk about optimization. So let's say that you do start to get some numbers that come across your desk and they are not what, the industry standard, or they're above or they're below or everything in between. These are some of the optimizations that we do internally to drive performance. So I'll say that before you can start optimizing towards performance, which could be a click-through rate, a conversion rate, whatever it might be, you do have to make sure that your line is pacing accordingly. Usually these types of ad systems, they're going to prioritize the ad serving to be able to get the budget out first, and then and only then can you start to make performance type of improvements to it. So first thing that we're going to do if we're seeing performance that might not be where we want it to be, or if we just want to improve overall, is we're going to evaluate the different types of site lists. So any vendor out there should be able to pull a site list and show you where every single one of your ads is serving. It could be everything from really big players like CNN and WeatherBug, down to like the Flashlight app and sometimes different things like that are popping up in the
content app space, but they should be able to show you a pretty comprehensive list. What Q1 Media does to be able to go in and evaluate that further is we just look for the performance. Sometimes sites that are performing well under, like a CTR benchmark, they'll just get blocked. Maybe the ad units aren't really good for driving engagement. Maybe it's just not resonating on that particular type of site with the content that we're advertising. So we'll go in and block list those. Obviously, if you start to pull hundreds of impressions, maybe even thousands of impressions off of sites that aren't performing, and you put them onto sites that are performing, you should start to see your CTR or your VCR or whatever you're optimizing towards start to go up. The other thing that we can do is we can shift more budget priority to those higher performing sites. Sometimes there's only so much that we can really shift over there. Sometimes there's only so much inventory for our target that might be in there to begin with, but it is a way to start to drive those performance metrics up just a tad. So that would be kind of the first step in the process. Next thing that you can do is you can look to tighten your frequency caps and or apply day parting. I think the typical frequency cap that we run with is a 3x24. That means that we'll serve somebody 3 ads within a 24-hour time frame. You can make that a 10x24. You can make that a 1x24. You can do everything in between, to send people as many ads as you need to. Sometimes if you're on like like a big spree to just get out as much content as you can, you might want to put your frequency cap really high to get that ad to as many people as you possibly can. That being said, if you mess with those frequency caps a little bit, sometimes people might be getting served the ad too much. So if you are getting 10 ads a day and you haven't clicked on it yet, we might want to reduce that, maybe change up our creative, which we'll talk about here in a little bit as well. Day parting can also come into play. Obviously people are consuming content across all hours of the day these days. Sometimes people still want to kind of lock into kind of their old broadcast schedules where they want to be, serving between 5 and 8 or sometimes during the prime time type of hours. Personally, I've always looked at this as when somebody's engaging with content, I want to be able to serve them an ad. If it's 3 a.m. and they're engaging with the type of content that we want to get in front of them, I'm fine serving them an ad at that time, as long as they're engaging with it. But if you can apply day parting to see, when are we getting the majority of our clicks? Is between 8 and 5 business type of hours? Do we skew a little bit later at night? Sometimes we can apply some day parting, which are going to help kind of chase the better metrics during the better times of the day. Third step that you can do is evaluate your creative. This would be something that I would highly recommend that we do regardless of whether or not our ads are performing or not. And so you can run creative analyses to see which ad sizes are performing the best. Maybe if you have different sets of creative and you've been doing like A/B type of testing, you can shift budget towards the sections that are doing a little bit better. Lots of times certain ad sizes will generate more clicks than others. So running a creative analysis will allow you to shift the budget where you can get the most bang for your buck. And then the other thing that I would highly suggest, some of Adele and I's clients do this very well, is rotate the creative on a pretty frequent basis. Maybe every 3 to 4 weeks might be a little bit much, but I would probably say definitely within every 2 to 3 months, rotating creative is going to give you fresh content that you can take out to the marketplace. It's going to almost change up the eyeballs, and that in terms of they'll be seeing something new from you instead of the same ad that they've seen for the last potential month here. So that's always a great way to drive some extra performance from your ads as well. And then the last thing, and this is 100% on your vendor, is really just kind of evaluating your bidding structures and the data layers that are on there. Sometimes you might have the bid structures that are set up, and we might need to go in there and up the bid structure a little bit to, chase the better inventory or chase the better eyeballs that are going to perform a little bit better. Sometimes the data layers that we put on there might be a little bit cost prohibitive, and they might be, eating into the amount that we can bid to actually serve the ad in there. So, taking a look at that holistically, I think can also help us if we're looking to drive some extra performance. And one of the other things that we do is we always look, all of these bigger exchanges and demand side platforms, they're always adding in new inventory and new data layers. So typically we'll also go in and see if there's some new data segments that we can layer on that might open us up to a few new eyeballs that we might not have been reaching before. So most of these things should be things that your vendors are doing for you. I would hope so, in the least. Like I said, this would be kind of our 1, 2, 3, 4 in terms of what we would do at Q1 Media if we want to drive performance higher. So I would feel really good about you pushing anybody that you're working with on any of these types of optimizations and ask them like, hey, are you doing these types of things for us daily, weekly, monthly? How often are you taking a look at our account, to be able to, make sure that everything is going as we've set it out to be? So the last little point that I want to make here is basically what you set up to optimize for. So I'm kind of putting like optimized conversions. Is that something that we should go for? So as we talk about kind of, returning value on the ad spend here, conversions would be something that we really want to lay out and define in terms of, what are we chasing as a true conversion? We'll talk a little bit about the foot traffic. In my sense, that's the truest conversion that I think you all are looking for. Somebody who comes and visits your casino, hopefully they stay in your hotel if you have one, and they spend a good bit of their money, within the confines of your area. But there's some other things that we've learned through the years to kind of, that we can help optimize for, or just help paint a little bit of a better picture. So we're driving a lot of people to your overall website where there's a ton of different pages and there's a ton of different tabs that they can engage with further. Some of these, which we've laid out in the past, could really show some strong secondary action. So we can place conversion pixels on things like, click for directions to the casino, or download your Players Club card now, or, book your room now, and different buttons where we've gotten somebody to the site and we can then track a secondary engagement. So another conversion I think that we could look at would be, room bookings, obviously that true foot traffic coming to your area. But at the same time, like I said, it's really just about how do we want to lay this out and how do we want to start to, evaluate what this spend is doing for us. I will mention though, that when it comes to optimization, sometimes you can't have your cake and eat it too. So if you're optimizing, let's say you have a pre-roll line item and you're optimizing towards that video completion rate, pre-roll ads are still clickable. You can click on that from your computer, from your mobile device, and you can go, to the client's end site, which is great. Typically, we optimize it towards the video completion rate because, like I said, the power of hearing that message or seeing that message for 15 or 30 seconds is more important than the click in that case for me. But that being said, sometimes we've had clients who say, well, oh, can you optimize towards the clicks and the video completion rate? And that's really, really difficult to do. So when it's kind of split like that, sometimes you've got to pick one or the other. I would say pick what you're going to get the most bang for your buck for. Usually if we're building a very well-rounded plan, I'm going to have tons of options that are going to click people to your site. The display options, the retargeting options, your SEM, all of that is going to click people to your site. I'd rather use the video and the audio and the podcasting really for them to hear that message all the way through. So be cognizant of that when you're talking about your optimizations with your vendors as well. Okay. Kind of quick pause. Any other questions pop up? Anything that we need to address on the Q&A, Julia?
No, John was John Wicks from Kickapoo Lucky Eagle.
We might have lost your audio. I'm not hearing you, Julia.
Oh, where is it? Are you near?
Maybe that's the audio I lost.
I can hear you.
Okay. If you can't hear me, then I'll still say it though. John mentioned that the content affects the metrics, and much like you were talking about creative affecting the metrics, he was saying, he gave an example of like paid search. When you use best rate guaranteed and add the extensions, he was able to move their OTA rates down, which was really great. And I think that goes to the same in the same bucket as just really your creative too, and just evaluating it. So but you mentioned that, and I know that we've had this conversation before. We know that you shouldn't make changes right when you get like the first day's data, maybe not even the second day or the first week. What do you typically recommend a client hold on to before they make that kind of like first shift? Now I can't hear you.
There we go. I was muted there for a second. A lot of that depends on, I would say, kind of the length of the campaign. If we're running like a 6 to 8 week push, you're probably going to have to start looking at that relatively quickly to make sure that, everything is handled in that time frame. If you're rolling your media out for a year and there's a year to go through it and make the optimizations with some changes along the way, you can stretch it out a little bit further. I would say anytime you're making changes, at least a minimum of about a week, about 7 days, to really kind of see these optimizations. I just changed our bid structure, or we just changed in our creative. How is that resonating? If you look at it after a day, it's just not a big enough of a sample size to be able to truly evaluate that. Usually within a week, you should start to see the shifts in performance start to go up and be able to reevaluate it. It's a great question though, because there is something to be said for over optimizing. If you're making a change every single day and then all of a sudden sudden something takes, you don't really know, like, what change really, impacted the, the performance change there. So I would probably say 7 to 14 days would be a pretty good evaluation window in terms of, hey, we just made some optimizations to our strategy here. Let's give it the next week or two to kind of evaluate those results. And like I said, you can pre and post it, hey, this was our CTR before, this is our CTR these last 7 to 14 days, and overall it impacted us X amount.
There's another question that I have, and I don't know the most appropriate way to answer this, but in terms of if you're going to do something that's like A/B testing, I don't want to put this down to like you have to spend at least $5,000 to think about an A/B test. What is it more about trying to achieve a certain level of impressions that validates an A/B test?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say it's sample size again. I mean, if you
Okay.
run 10,000 impressions, which is really just a drop in a bucket, and try to use that for your comparison, just not a very big sample size. Once again, I do think the length of the contract, and like how quickly things might be happening, could push that further, or earlier in the process where you're evaluating that split, or maybe give it a little bit of a longer time. But once you start to have hundreds of thousands of impressions being run, and they're both relatively equal for the set A and the set B, you should start to see some type of dichotomy between them. And if you don't, then maybe it's just kind of split right down the middle. So good questions. Please keep them coming. We got a couple more slides here to get through and, kind of dig just a tad deeper here. So when I'm starting to evaluate campaigns, raw metrics is always the very first spot that we're going to be. We can't talk about filling people's funnels and all these conversions and everything else we've been talking about for a few weeks now until we make sure that we're delivering on those raw metrics. I'm counting on a specific, click-through rate to be had there because I'm counting on X amount of that traffic getting to your website to then be retargeted and work into different pieces of our funnel. So that's always going to be first and foremost. So you should be receiving digital metrics in that raw form pretty much on a regular basis. I would say at least on a monthly basis, quarterly at the absolute minimum. You should be evaluating all that, and you should be weighing those against those types of benchmarks. Getting 1,000 more clicks to your site each month could be another 50 people that visit you in the long run, give or take. So sometimes it's really important to make sure that we're looking at that. So once that box is kind of checked, the next thing that we can start to take a look at is kind of the overall website traffic. So I've said this for years now, and especially, in this casino space, we can serve somebody an ad. It does not mean that they're going to turn around and jump in their car and drive to see us within, the next day or so, or make that visit anytime soon. It is something that sometimes takes a while to nurture, and it takes a while to get there. So I like to look at overall traffic to the website as kind of an additional way to evaluate the healthiness of a particular campaign. So, remember that we are reaching a lot of people on the mobile devices these days. It's where more and more ad serving is shifting. Still a lot of inventory all over the space, but this is very, very heavy. As we've talked about before, the caveat to that is not a lot of time on site, higher bounce rates, so on and so forth. But I will kind of argue that if we've set up our targeting correctly, if we're serving it all correctly, and we are generating at least that awareness, these people will be able to come back to our site and they'll engage with us in a different way. It might not be from that first click attribution, but they'll come back because they are more aware of our brand and they'll engage with us on their time. So taking a look at things like your direct traffic and your organic search, which very frequently are funneled from a well-placed digital campaign, showing those types of increases over time can be very beneficial and show what your ad spend is doing beyond just the clicks that are coming to your site right then and there. So I would highly suggest that we start to look at this. This is something that, while I'm definitely not an expert, I've learned to kind of meander through it, really just to kind of prove, what I want to prove from some of our ad serving campaigns, which is, it's doing more than just getting that initial click to your site. This is filling your funnel longer term. We're showing more people coming to your site, year over year or period over period. So typically what I'll do is I'll look at a range of time. So I was actually just running one of these for a client just about an hour ago. And I just looked at the first 4 months of this year, so January through the end of April. And then I compared it against the previous period, which was last September through December. And you can also compare it year over year. So you can go back and compare it to last year's January through April. And what I'm really looking for is just any type of trends that we're seeing. Are we getting more people to the site this time versus the previous period? Usually that's a pretty good precursor. If we're not, are there other things that we can start to dig into? So the next slide here will actually show you a report. It's got redacted client information, but I'll point out some of these caveats of the different things that we can be looking for. The next thing that you can do within your Google Analytics, and this is where it starts to get even a little bit further over my head. I use this as an evaluation tool, but I'm not overly skilled in terms of setting everything up. But you can work with a company that will help you to set goal conversions within Google Analytics. So, click for directions or downloaded our Players Club card or, whatever. It's basically like a tag on your site that will link up with Google Analytics to show whatever conversion that you're trying to track there. So setting these goal completions can also show return on ad spend, depending on, what you might be tracking there. I'll share that in my overall tourism campaigns, where we're obviously trying to drive people more to an area of the country or a state or whatever it might be. One of the things that we track very heavily is their destination guide download. So when you go to these people's tourism sites, you can download their destination guide, which you can either pull up on your computer. Some people even still mail the hard copy to you. And if we can track that, especially in the tourism world, I feel pretty good that somebody who's taken the time to download that guide is probably going to turn into a visitor at some point. So once again, it's about showing some secondary actions that you're getting from this overall ad spend beyond the raw metrics and beyond the foot traffic, which we'll talk about here in a second. Okay. And the caveat to this is it also gives you a chance to evaluate some of the other site metrics, like how are your ads performing once people get there? Are people bouncing really fast? Do they come to your site and then bounce real quick before taking any actions? What is their time on site? That's what the TOS is. What is their average page per session? So there's different ways to kind of evaluate this as you get a little bit deeper into it. Google Analytics review is something that we've started to offer to all of the clients that we work with. Like I said, it's just kind of a second set of checks and balances that let us know that our campaign is healthy, it's performing, and it's doing what we want to do in the long run. One other thing that I'll kind of mention, and I think John was kind of harping on this a second ago, is, sometimes when you're evaluating some of these metrics, it can poke holes with your go-to-market strategy. So if you are seeing high bounce rates or, people aren't spending a lot of time on site, you can, take a look and say, hey, does the user experience, the visual experience they see when they click on my creative, does it line up with when they get to the site? If it's a pretty seamless experience that looks a lot, is that John's thumb that's going up like that? If it's a seamless experience, where they can see your ad unit and then go to your site and start to engage with the same visual type of content, lots of times that's going to work out a little bit better for you than if it's a completely different, you go from a black and white ad here to a colorful ad there, so on and so forth. So there's so many different things, and there's so many different, holes that we can poke, even in our own campaigns and our own plans, by starting to evaluate these types of metrics.
Well, and to John's point too, when a perfect example is if you are running an ad that's trying to drive room bookings, but you send that click to your homepage, you probably get a better return if you send it directly to the booking engine. And you
Correct.
can test it sometimes. I mean, that's something you can A/B test too, where the click ends up. By the way, because Google Analytics 4 has been the bane of my existence for like a year now, I actually sat in on a webinar that showed me really easily how to create those goals, those events. So if anybody wants the link to that webinar, it was 90 minutes long, but it was very helpful. I'm happy to share the link with you.
Fantastic. Great questions and great feedback as well. So glad we're kind of in sync on that one. So I wanted to actually pull up an actual report here, and this is an advertiser that we've been doing the advertising for the last at least 2 years, and we're into our 3rd year now. And you can see I've run kind of a year over year report here from pretty much January through June of 22, and then, compared it for January through June of 21, which we were also their vendor. So the very first thing we're looking at is you see these red arrows going down for users, new users, and sessions. Typically, that's not what you want to see. You don't want to see less traffic coming to your site. So sometimes that can be a little bit of a cause for concern, unless you set up to do things a little bit differently. But it also gives us a chance to look at some of these other kind of secondary metrics that we can see here. Where is this coming from? Is it so other is usually going to be the category that it kind of catches, it's the catch-all for anything that's not set up as organic search or direct or paid search or social or something, coming in from that. But we can evaluate the different areas that our users are coming from, but we can also look at the behavior. So going from the acquisition, which are those first three columns, how many new people did we get to the site, to looking at the behaviors. So in this case, while our overall numbers were down, our bounce rate was also significantly down. It means that people are sticking on the site a little bit longer. Our pages per session and our average duration were up slightly. It means that people are engaging with the content a little bit longer. But for this particular campaign, one of the things that we had really tried to focus on is kind of nurturing people further down that funnel and really getting the end result of what we were looking for. So we were tracking, an application form that was being filled out. So seeing those high amounts of that application form going up compared to the previous period lets us know that we're getting the ads in front of the right people. So our targeting was better, or maybe the creative lined up with the website, so on and so forth, a little bit better. But it lets us know ultimately, even though we have less people coming to the site, we're getting more of those goal conversions that we're looking for. So, lots of times you can evaluate these types of metrics with your vendor, or even with, within your own, marketing departments, to kind of take a look at the overall health of the campaign. Typically, a lot of the times, unless we put UTM codes on the ads that we run, all of the ad serving that Q1 Media does typically is going to pop up in that other category there. But like I said, since it's very mobile heavy, lots of times you plant that seed, you get people there. The bounce rate might not be all that great, but they're going to come back on their own. So you can look at your organic search. They type you in, see you in the search results, and then just click on your link to come there. I think that is going to be fueled by planting the seed with the right people. So lots of different ways to evaluate this. And I know that we're just kind of barely scratching the surface in terms of what this can do, but I really wanted you to be a little bit more aware that these are services that your vendors can be and probably should be offering, because as I said, it gives you a little bit of a deeper evaluation into your overall campaign, definitely beyond just those raw metrics and clicks and video views that they send over in the monthly reporting. So this is, kind of checkbox number 2. We've done the raw metrics, those are lining up. We're taking a look at our Google Analytics. We're seeing what we want to see. And then we can kind of bring it all to fruition with a foot traffic type of report here. So this uses our Polygon technology, which we've talked about. We reviewed the data from Rain Rock Casino last week, where you all saw that polygon that I drew, around the casino boundaries there. And pretty much what we call this is it's an influence location visit report. So each one of these visits that we are counting as a visit, this isn't your overall visitation. This is a visitation from people that we served ads to. So it's influenced by our particular ad campaign. Now, can we say that, they saw your ad once, clicked on it, and that's what drove the visit? No, we're not going to be able to boil it all the way down to that. It might be a lot of other mixes from your marketing channel that come into play, but we can at least say that this person saw one of the ads that we served for you, and then they stepped into to our casino confines there. So obviously, we do still include some digital metrics there. You see total amount of impressions, clicks, CTR. Uniques is how many unique individuals we reached for that campaign. So of the 211,000 people that we reached on a unique basis there, we were able to drive visitation from roughly, I don't know, what's that, about 12% of them. So down at the bottom line there, we've got 2 different visit metrics here. We've got a total amount of visits, and then we've got the total visitors. So the total visitors is the unique number. So 27,382, unique devices were observed within this casino confines. And of those 20,000 unique devices, they visited 98,000 times, which is important. This denotes people who are coming and staying a few days. This denotes a lot of repeat visitation as well. So these are the types of things that we want to see. And then we can start to break things down even further from there. What's your cost per visit or your cost per unique visitor? In this case, it was based on the overall spend on this campaign. It took, basically $7.45 to drive that device to your casino confines. Now we can start to talk ROI, with your bosses and whoever we need to discuss that with. I'm pretty sure the average person who walks into casino is going to spend way more than $7.45. So we're already ROI positive on that. And you can start to apply these figures even deeper if you can start to run analytics on how much does the average person spend? How much do they spend in gaming? How much do they spend staying at the hotel? How much do they spend in food and bev? So on and so forth. And if you come up with a figure and you weigh it against what it costs you to drive that person there, you can start to talk about ROI with your campaign. So These would be the type of this would be kind of checkbox number 3, raw metrics, Google Analytics. And this is really kind of the end all be all, because to me, this is what you all pay us for, is to be able to show that we drove significant traffic to your, to your institution or to your casino confines from the ad serving that we put out there. So these are just a couple of different ways that we track the attribution. It should be out there and available through most types of digital partners and vendors that you're working with these days. I will, tell you, for me, in the tourism space, and especially expanding deeper into this tourism vertical, casino vertical, there has not been a single campaign that I have run that has not analyzed foot traffic analysis. So if we're not getting that this day and age, I think that we can push vendors to do that for us, and or just find somebody who might be able to deliver it for you. It should allow you to, show better return on your ad spend, and then we can start to kind of talk a little bit deeper about, maybe adding to budgets and, enhancing our marketing budget further to drive more people there. It can help you, have deeper conversations with the powers that be or whoever you report to in terms of influencing, what portion of our spend should be on the traditional side versus the digital side, so on and so forth. So, like I said, a lot of this is really just kind of meant to give you an idea of what is out there in the digital ecosphere in terms of how you can run your campaigns better, set them up better, track them better, and, most importantly, show this type of attribution. So that's a pretty good kind of, update on anything and everything that we do to kind of show the attribution here. Hopefully this lines up really, really well with the things we've talked about over Digital 101, the different solutions that are out there, lining up your data and targeting, and now kind of bringing it to fruition in terms of how you analyze the campaign. Adele's going to talk with us in 3 weeks, I guess, on really how we now take this digital world and then also wrap it in with your TV vendors and your radio vendors and how you build one overall overarching campaign that handles all of your media needs out there. But that being said, this kind of wraps up my portions of the webinar. Any real questions for me or anything else that's kind of come up, whether it be right now, today, and or anything that we've discussed over these first 4 weeks?
No, I don't see any more questions from today. I love the fact that we can track the location traffic. That's something that's always been a mystery to us because we just haven't had that ability. But
Sure.
I think it's also, I feel like in order to use these new channels the best way, we also have to do some work on our sites too. So, I've seen a few sites. Think about it. There's over 900 casinos in this country. So there's 900 different websites. And I would venture to say there's a large portion of them that are not maybe mobile ready. And if you're doing a lot of this digital advertising and people are using their devices, we really should be looking at where are we sending people? Because if we're sending them to a website that's not going to be friendly, we could have the best creative in the world and the best placement. We're going to get a lot of bounces though.
And that's correct. And so now we're starting to talk a little bit deeper about how all of this, it really does work in concert, and I do think you can use a lot of these metrics that we've talked about to try to, poke those holes into where we might be negligent within that entire holistic process. But at the same time, like at a minimum, getting this type of data sent to you on a monthly basis with the raw metrics, taking a look at what it's doing for you on your backend website with your Google Analytics, and then most importantly, that location visit stuff, that's kind of paramount.
Yeah.
Lots of times, keep in mind, we keep talking about this marketing funnel. We're always working with people up at the top that we're trying to move down. It could be 3 or 4 months by the time we serve somebody their first ad before they step sight into our casino.
Mm-hmm.
It could be 3 or 4 weeks. We don't, can't always overly 100% track that, but we can kind of poke holes based on the data that's out there in terms of, especially when you start to look at those Google Analytics, we can start to identify, maybe some weak spots in what we might have in our campaign strategy, and we can address that along the way. So I think the important thing is, don't let these types of campaigns be set it and forget it. You should be pushing your partners to provide this type of data for you, at least on a, like I said, a monthly, bi-monthly, quarterly basis. You should be probably reviewing this, and along the way, you should be able to make changes and you should be able to make optimizations. I think I said it before, sometimes the best laid plans, they go awry, and you can, sit down and talk through strategy with your client and have almost a foolproof strategy. But guess what? If you get 4 or 5 months in and it's not working, things have to change. You've got to revise. You can't sit there and just not hit the KPIs for a campaign. So pretty consistent analysis and getting this type of information, from your partners is really that first step.
And we're in a good spot right now because, I mean, some of these channels have been around for a long time, but they've been very much the set it and forget it. So, Entercom would come to you and sell you some kind of digital package. And I'm not knocking Entercom. I don't know why that name just came up, but they, they could sell you a package, and we're talking 2 or 3 years ago, and you kind of had like one creative and it ran the whole time, and you didn't really get a lot of flexibility in blocking sites or changing creative or just kind of fine tuning things. You sort of had that campaign, much like you placed a radio spot and it went out, right?
Sure.
So there's a lot. And I think the other thing, the mobile website was the thing that came to my mind, but also, in looking at that report that you showed, and in that case, it was a year-over-year report. We look at reports with a variety of periods over periods, but the fact that Google is going to stop collecting data in the universal analytics that everybody is using right now in July something or other. And so if you haven't set up your Google Analytics yet, you're going to be missing some of that year-over-year data unless you download it and keep it, right? So that's another thing to add to the list of things to do.
Agreed.
Yeah. To make sure that you can evaluate these campaigns properly.
That is correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
I guess we're wrapping up early today.
Yeah, kind of got through the content a little bit quicker today, a little bit less verbose than some of the first few weeks here. So
anonymous attendee says, "Well done, great job." I don't know.
glad. Thank you, anonymous attendee.
She also said app analytics versus site analytics is a very good conversation. That's true. We're looking at different things too. John said that was him. All right, so we will see everybody in 3 weeks. I might see some people next week for our G4 session. Janine will be happy to send you the marketing funnel if you want that. And if anybody wants the link to that webinar that it's at in, I'm happy to share it. Just let me know.
Yeah, I'll be providing all of the decks that I reviewed for these first few weeks. I'll send them to you, Julia, to share with anybody and everybody that's interested.
Awesome. Thanks,
Take
guys.
care, everybody. Thanks so much.
Bye.